What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of The Block is Hot. In this episode, we're going to be going over one of the most common questions I get as a CNFT person, thingamajig, YouTuber, whatever you want to call me, guy with nice hair, and that's, what should I do if I have this amount of ADA? If I have 1,000 ADA, if I have 3,000 ADA, if I have 5,000 ADA, 10,000, 100,000, and I'm going to be going over that. And to be honest with you guys, a lot of people ask me for what projects to get into, but the real question you should be asking is what strategies should I have and how should I really utilize that ADA at those different levels at the fullest to get the best bang for my buck as quickly as possible. So yeah, we're going to cover that, and without further ado, let's get into it. Before getting into this video, I just want to preface by saying that I realize everybody is in different situations, not only with their ADA amount, but the amount of time they have. So I'm just going to assume here the idealist position of, hey, you actually have the amount of time to really invest in this space and take time in this space and really grow here, rather than, you know, assuming that some people might work 80 hours or 40 hours, or some people, this might be their full-time thing. You guys get the point. But step one here, we have 1,000 ADA. If I had 1,000 ADA, I would be primarily focused on using my time to bring value and to make me money. What do I mean by that? Well, guys, instead of holding a bunch of CNFTs, waiting for them to go up, instead of trying to swing trade a bunch of different stuff that could take time as well and be a little bit more risky, all I would be doing is looking for high quality projects that have not minted yet, and I would try to get into their whitelist by grinding out on their Discord and doing different Discord invites, or I'd be looking for projects that don't even have a whitelist that have a ton of potential. Minting is something incredibly lucrative because if you get into the right projects, you can almost guarantee that you're going to be able to make money from that flip. And being able to flip a bunch of different projects is how you're really going to get your ADA bag up. Example here, Ape Society. These cabins were like 150 ADA, I believe, but for the longest time they were going for 300 ADA. That was the floor, and you were able to get this in the public without even needing a whitelist. So this was the perfect situation, guys, where maybe you got one cabin and you were able to turn 150 into 300. And then on the off chance that you got super lucky and pulled a chateau or pulled a cottage or an estate or whatever's bigger in this situation, you would have made a substantial amount of money, and that ADA would have been much better going into a mint like this than just holding into a project and waiting for it to go up 10, 20, 30, 40% over the course of months. Other examples, pitches at Clay Nation. This was an example where it was a drop that we knew was going to be super profitable because Clay Nation stuff was already profitable. You could get in at 100 ADA or whatever the ADA amount was. I actually believe it was 150 ADA. And worst case scenario, if you got one of these Bake Nation pitches, which was a small, you turn that 150 into 400. That is a huge dub. If you got lucky and got a large, maybe you turn that into $2,000. Maybe you were able to get multiple. This is when I would really have a bunch of wallets. I would really grind out these whitelists, and I would get into these projects. I'd get into them hard, and I would flip them, and I would move on to the next thing. And hopefully along the way, you get super, super lucky, and you can get some rare ones that really do big paydays. If you have under 1,000 ADA though, you're gonna wanna be selective, and you're not gonna wanna be getting into a bunch of different risky stuff. This is where patience comes in handy. You're gonna want to wait for drops like Mechanism Overexposed, where if you won the raffle, you turn 150 into 500, and that's if you got a floor piece. You're going to want to be looking for stuff like ADA and Vedas, where it was 90 ADA, and within 1 week, it actually went all the way up to 700 ADA for a floor piece. That is another example of making a ton of money just waiting for the right projects. I could go into Space Pugs Alpha. This was a project that you could have gotten a whitelist for. If you had whitelist, you were able to get 10. I believe they were 40 ADA each, so you would have spent 400 ADA. Now, not even a month later, guys, they're each going for 300 ADA. So that would have been a huge, huge, huge dub getting into this project by just farming out that whitelist. And then there are some other smaller projects, guys, like Safari Squad, where you're at least making 20, 30, 40 ADA. Claypez, another situation where you could have doubled your money with Claypez, and that is a floor piece. Ape DAO you would have made a little bit of money on. Steel Society is another one that had run all the way up to 400 ADA. This is what I would be doing, guys. Use your time to find good projects, use your time to get whitelisted into different things, and use this time to scale up your infrastructure and to scale up the amount of wallets you have and really just get into that flipping game. Now, I realize realize that we're not always in a flipping type market. We're not always in a minting type market, but there's always going to be projects, guys, that come along that are going to be profitable. And that's what I would prioritize your time and money in. The next level here, guys, is that 3,000 ADA number. You were able to go from under 1,000 ADA and get all the way to 3,000 ADA basically just by flipping different things. And once you're at this 3,000 ADA level, I still think that you should be heavily focused on minting and flipping stuff. But now you can be a little bit more speculative in the aspect that, hey, maybe this mint isn't going to do super well, but worst case scenario, I only lose 10 to 20% if I got a floor piece. And then in a better case scenario, maybe I'm making a decent amount of money by getting something higher. So this is a situation where you can be a little bit more risky. Whereas if you were under this 3,000 ADA level, I would really just be super patient on waiting for those high level projects. At this 3,000 ADA level though, I would now get into swing trading some of these smaller projects or some of these larger projects if you're confident on it. And I talk about swing trading a lot, guys, but it's essentially buying a project that not a lot of people have their eyes on because nothing is really going on, but you know that something is about to happen. And then when that happens, you know that more people are going to buy it. So an example of this, guys, was with Ape Nation. And Ape Nation is a little bit special here, but Ape Nation was going to have these vials to mutate your apes essentially. So that was a catalyst news that was going to bring more eyes into this project. So if you knew that Ape Nation was going to do that before a lot of people really knew about it, that would be a good opportunity to get into some of those Ape Nations while leaving some ADA on the side for mints and then waiting for that news to come out and then selling on the run up. And another example of this, guys, is obviously Chilled Kongs. They were going for about 600 to 700 ADA. We knew that those trippy announcement for the Trippy Kongs was going to come out soon, and we knew that that was going to cause a lot of people to get into Chilled Kongs. So that was another situation where within a month you could turn 600 ADA into 2,000 ADA. Makosi was another one. We knew their planet was coming out. They went from 350 all the way to 500 essentially, and now they dropped all the way back down to this 400 level after that major utility or after that announcement. Another example here, Javelins, Cornucopias. We knew that there was going to be a land sale announcement. We had a good idea that these were going to be whitelist. We could have put some of our money into here that wasn't minting things, like I said, guys, and we could have, hopefully made some money off of that swing on the run up. Ape Society is one that was a little bit more ADA to get into. It would have been 1,800 out of the 3,000 ADA you had, so you would have had to be really confident about this, but this was another example of it running from 1,800 ADA all the way up to 3,000 ADA before that cabin drop, and that would have been a good opportunity for you to really get that swing. Now, I absolutely love swing trades, guys, especially if you don't have a ton of ADA, because you're shortening the time interval for you to make a profit or a return, and that's essentially what you want to do if you don't have a ton of ADA right now. You want to be able to get in and out of things relatively quickly and get those huger gains or bigger gains by doing that. I could spend, the 3,000 ADA budget on one Clay Nation, be confident about it, but maybe I have to wait 6 months for me to get a 20 to 30% return. Or I could take that 3,000 ADA, I could have bought 30 Cornucopias GTI Javelins at 100 ADA, knowing that that land was soon, knowing that these were probably going to be a whitelist, and I could have made 140 times 30 off of every single one of those GTI Javelins. So I would have had a 2.3 to 2.4x after the fees within a 2-week interval rather than making 30 to 40% over a 6-month interval. And that's really what I'd be prioritizing at this ADA level, or if you just don't have a ton of ADA, you want to be getting into stuff that's going to give you your returns quickly. And by knowing the knowledge in the space, by putting that time in, and by knowing what's coming up, and by really mastering the skills and being able to get in and out of these different projects, you are just simply going to make money faster. And the faster that you can make that money and the bigger you can get your bags, now that's when you can get into some safer, bigger stuff that takes up more of your ADA. But at this point in the game, I really don't think you should be just holding on to stuff for a super, super long time unless you're not really interested into the swing trading thing, or unless you really just don't have the time to be doing that stuff. The next level here is 5,000 ADA. At this level, I would still be heavily focused on minting and swing trading stuff, but the difference is I would scale that up. So instead of just minting 1 or 2 of a new project, project, I would try to mint 10. Instead of just buying one GTI Javelin, I'm going to buy 10 GTI Javelins. And hopefully at this point in the game, you have a lot more confidence into what projects to go for, what projects to flip, what projects to swing trade. And hopefully you can just take what you learned from that 1,000 ADA or that 3,000 ADA and basically do that at this 5,000 ADA level at just a higher level. The only difference with getting to 5,000 ADA is I do think that you could take a percentage, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 ADA out of that 5,000 ADA and just invest in some low cost blue chips or things that you think are going to be blue chips in the future that aren't super expensive yet. I wouldn't be getting into Clay Nation. I wouldn't be getting into Space Buds. I wouldn't be getting into Chilled Kongs or Ape Society necessarily or Dead Pixels. That's simply going to take up too much of your ADA. And once these projects are at a high cost, such as 2,000, it takes a lot of money for it to really move from 2,000 to 3,000. And, yes, that's a 50% gain, but it might take months and months and months for that to really happen. So I would be looking at projects such as Yumi, such as Cornucopia's Jets, such as Smooth Yetis, such as Ada Invadas, such as Mandrills, these mechanisms. Maybe you even get into Equinine or Equine, however you want to call it. Old Money's got potential. Clumsy Ghost has gotten on my radar recently. You've got projects like Cardano Croc Club that is constantly doing a bunch of different stuff in the space. You have Ape Nation. Like, these are the projects that I would get into. Kind of like the mid tier that have high potential to be blue chips or that have just shown that they have a lot of potential to deliver. The reason why I bought a bunch of Mandrills is because I'm like, okay, I like that narrative and I think their team is going to be doing a lot of stuff, and I think I could see that going up a lot. Ada Invadas. Why have I not sold any of the Ada Invadas? Well, guys, I think Ada Invadas is going to have a ton of utility. I believe in the team. I like the art, and I think this is going to be bigger in the future. I would much rather, at 5,000 Ada, buy 5 of these Ada Invadas at 500 each than buy one of these Clay Nations at 2,500, because it'll be a lot easier, guys, for these Ada Invadas to go from 500 to, let's say, 700 or 1,000 than for this Clay Nation to go from 2,500 to, let's say, 3,500, right? So that is what I would primarily be focusing on, looking for the different deals in the space and potentially getting into some things that you think are undervalued. Smooth Yeti Mountain Club is a prime example of this. I'm a ride or die with this team now at this point. I really still see the potential of this, and this is a prime example, guys, of a project that has dropped significantly after their snowmobile sale, which is a catalyst news that we can swing trade. So this might be one of those projects that I just buy and I'm like, hey, I think this is a really good entry point, and I'm just going to wait a couple months. And if they do their Yetiverse and the games and the token and all of this stuff, maybe this could go from 200 to 400, and now I'm making a double rather than once again getting into something like Space Buds that's just going to take so much more money to move. The next ADA level that we're at, guys, is 10,000 ADA. This is a big milestone for a lot of people, and congratulations if you got here. I know that everyone is around the world and people are different ages with different backgrounds that can afford different amounts of money, so it's cool to be able to get to this point, and it is accomplishment. One thing that I like to bring up to everybody here as I'm going over this whole strategy thing is that never compare yourself to other people. Your only competition is yourself. It doesn't matter how much ADA I have, how much ADA someone else has. All that matters is how much ADA you have and how you're going to grow it and work on it and learn and grow in the space. Every accomplishment, regardless of how big or small it is still an accomplishment. And if you can just grow your portfolio or get better every day, even if it's only 1% at a time, then that is a huge accomplishment. And I have to give you a shout out for just watching this video and trying to learn more about the space. I constantly have to remind myself that even though I have a decent amount of ADA, that I'm still very far away from my goals, and I can't be jealous or envious of anyone that has a lot more ADA than me. I simply have to look at that as a goal and as a milestone and continue to try to improve myself. So a little bit of a TED Talk in there. But yeah, you have 10,000 ADA right now. What are you doing? Well, guys, I think you have to have some sort of ratio here that really balances out your risk to reward ratio. So for example, getting into these top tier blue chips might not have as much upside or might not have as much growth in the short term, but it is a project that you know is going to do well long term in case the CNFT market just collapses 70 or 80%. And that's not out of the realm of possibility, guys. I want to remind everyone that, just because if you've been paying attention to crypto, you'll see that this past month, especially the past week or two, has been brutal. I felt like we've been in the trenches. It's honestly hard to make videos when shit is just hitting the fan. But regardless, that can happen with CNFTs, but getting into something like Space Buds is a belief in the overall market rather than a belief in that individual project per se. So what do I mean by that? I mean that as long as CNFTs are successful, success not in the time frame of a month or 2 months, but in the time frame of 5, 10, 15 years, as long as CNFTs make it and are successful and are something that people continue to believe in and buy, then something like Space Buds is never going to go away. Something like Clay Nation, in my opinion, is never going to go away. Something like Ape Society, something like Chilled Kongs, they've really invested so much time and money into the space, and they're such OGs and they're such powerhouses that you can really trust them in the long term, even if in the short term you're not making as much money. So I would probably take anywhere from 30 to 50% of my money and get into some of these top tier blue chips that you're just holding. For me, I'm still swing trading a bunch of stuff, but I'm confident on that. But that is what I would be doing for the average person. Maybe get one Clay Nation. Maybe get a Clay Nation in an Ape Society. Maybe you get a Chilled Kongs in an Ape Society. Maybe you just get one Space Buds. Maybe you get a Dead Pixel and a Boss Cat. Maybe you buy 10 plots of these Clay Nation bake pitches and wait for that whole Bake Nation PFP thing that is sure to come and is sure to be super profitable. That is the stuff that I would be looking at. And my personal opinion, my favorite blue chips right now, like my top 3, are probably Clay Nation, Chilled Kongs, and Ape Society. And maybe you take out Chilled Kongs and you switch that with Dead Pixel. But really, these 5 right here, I feel like you can't go wrong with. The next thing that I would do with that remainder ADA is I'd probably put 20 to 30% of it into different smaller blue chips. Maybe you're getting into stuff like cornucopias, like the Yetis, like ADA and Vedas, mandrills, mechs, like I said. So maybe 20 to 30% of that. And then the rest of it, I would be getting into swing trades, be getting into mints, and then potentially some shit further down this list that you think is just super slept on that has a ton of potential, and just kind of have that overall ratio. The last level that we're going to cover here, guys, is 100,000 ADA. And I do realize that there's a huge difference between 10,000 ADA and 100,000 ADA. And essentially what I would do in between that zone, guys, is the same thing that you would do with 10,000 ADA, but as you progressively get more and more ADA, I would have a stronger and larger ratio towards blue chips, and less of your money going into smaller stuff, and less of your money going into mints and different swing trades. And here's why, guys. As time goes on, as you get more money, the return that you're going to get from minting or swing trading is going to be a lot smaller in comparison to your overall wallet, and it might not be worth the time. For example, and there's a couple examples that I want to bring up here. Smooth Yeti Mountain Club. We knew that those snowmobile parts were going to be profitable. But the challenge is that you weren't guaranteed any of the parts, right? So if you were someone that wanted to hold 100 Yetis in order to able to get into that mint, it wouldn't potentially matter because you were only so fast. You would have only been able to get so many. Maybe you were only able to get 2 parts. Maybe you were only able to get 5 parts. And let's say that you were able to get 2 parts, guys. Let's say that you were able to get 2 parts. Well, maybe you made 200 or 300 ADA, but you had 100 Yetis at 200 ADA each. So you had $200,000 or 200,000 ADA invested in Yetis, and you were only able to make 300 from that mint. And the same thing goes for the Ape Society cabins. Maybe we knew that those cabins were going to do well and have a clean double up. Or in this case, they're only 50 ADA above the floor. But maybe it wouldn't have even been worth your time to go for this drop, because if you could only make 150 ADA by getting one of them, and it took you 3 hours because this drop was cancerous, then potentially that ADA amount compared to your overall bag is really insignificant, and you're better off putting your time into different things. So the same thing goes with swing trading, where maybe you wanted to get into these javelins to make a swing trade, but for you to make $1,000, maybe you needed to buy 5 of these, maybe 10 of them, maybe 20 of them, maybe 30 of them. And it gets to the point where you're trying to do a swing trade, but you're putting so much capital into a project that you're messing up the swing trade, and it's going to be hard for you to get in and out of that project because there's not going to be enough liquidity. And yes, there's going to be some random situations like chilled Kongs where you have a project that has just had an insane amount of volume and an insane amount of liquidity, so you could swing trade at those higher levels. But how often is a top 5 or top 10 project really dropping something really big that you're just going to be able to, have this massive swing trade on? So ultimately what you're going to want to do, in my opinion, as you start getting into these higher ADA levels, if you don't want to be as active and if you really don't want to grind stuff out as much, is start having a higher ratio to these blue chips. And what you're going to want to do to scale isn't necessarily minting a bunch of stuff or isn't necessarily swing trading a bunch of stuff, but your scale is going to be with the overall market and the scale of how expensive those NFTs are. For example, and I know this is kind of complicated, it's taken me a couple tries to really try to explain this, but for example, guys, let's say that Clay Nation had a double up. Let's say Clay Nation was 2,500 and it had a double up to 5,000 ADA. Yes, you had a double up, which is great, and you made 2,500 ADA. 2,500 ADA when compared to your 100,000 ADA is a 2.5% gain, which is a pretty decent gain. But let's say instead you had gotten into Smooth Yetis that had a 4X and these went to 800. Well, guys, if you had one Yeti, yes, you had a 4X here, but you only at the end of the day made 600 ADA compared to the 2,500 ADA that you would have made with Clay Nation. And yes, you could have bought a lot more Yetis, but then you deal with liquidity issues, and then you have to hope that, Yetis had a 4X. But the truth of the matter is, guys, is you can have less of an overall movement with Clay Nation, a double up compared to a 4X on another project, yet because Clay Nations are so expensive, that overall ADA amount is a lot higher when compared to your overall portfolio. Whereas if you don't have a ton of ADA right now, if you only had 3,000 ADA, you'd be much better off going for the Smooth Yetis because you would have been able to make that money faster. And that ADA difference, even from 200 to 400, that 200 ADA difference would have been a much bigger impact on your overall portfolio. So if I had to kind of summarize this here, if I had around 100,000 ADA to really invest as a general person, not as myself, because, like I said, guys, I'm very active and I can, be more full-time in this, but I would just be investing into some of these big blue chips. Maybe I get some really good Clay Nations. Maybe I get some snipes on some nice ones. Maybe I get a couple space buds. Maybe I load up on some dead pixels. Maybe I get a king here, or maybe just get some, nice apes. Maybe I get some apes from different families. Maybe I buy 5 or 10 of these. Maybe I get into Baked Nation super heavy and I get 20 of those baked pitches. Maybe I get super heavy into cornucopias, pick up some Disco Solaris. Like, I would really be focusing on some of these major blue chips though. And then maybe at that ratio, 70% of your money or 60 to 70% of your money is into blue chips because that's safer. You're not going to have as much downside while still being able to get those huge ADA gains just as a overall ratio. But then you also can take maybe 30% of that, still do some swing trades at a smaller scale, and definitely put some money into some of these, potential future blue chips like ADA and Vedas, Smooth Yetis, Mandrels, Overexposed, Cornucopias. You got Old Money, Cardano, Crocs. You guys get the point. Man, that was an absolute mouthful, guys. I hope I was able to explain that in a way that made sense. I do like the whole problem that people have once they start having a lot more money in this space is definitely liquidity, though. You're just not going to have the levels of liquidity that you want to have to get into these smaller swing trades and to get into some of these smaller projects. Yes, you're really going to be able to move these projects in price as you buy them, but it's going to take you a hell of a lot of time to really sell your position just because you're going to have to buy so many. I'd much rather buy, 5, 10 Clay Nations than buy 100 Smooth Yetis. It's just going to be so much easier to move, and it's just going to be so much easier. But to kind of summarize the strategies here, guys, going down the list, if I had 1,000 ADA, I would be grinding out those whitelist, get into some super high quality mints, flip a bunch of stuff, and hopefully get lucky on a few of the mints. If I had 3,000 ADA, I'm still heavily on the mints, but maybe I'm a little less selective, and then I'm starting to get into some swing trading at a small level of getting into things that I know have catalyst news, and I'm basically using my knowledge on the space to be able to make some different trades and be able to get ADA a lot quicker. At 5,000 ADA, you're still doing both of the above of swing trading and flipping, but now you might get into one long-term blue chip, such as Clay Nation or such as Ape Society. Next part here was the 10,000 ADA. You're going to get heavier into blue chips, probably 30 to 50%, depending on how much time you really want to put under this space. And then that's when you're really going to want to scale up your different swing trades as well, because I think that at that level, you're kind of at a good position where maybe you can buy 10 to 20 at a time, make some decent money off of swing trades. And then between that 10 to 100,000 ADA level, especially once you get above 100,000 ADA, I would definitely get a lot heavier into blue chips because you're going to start running into liquidity issues with other things. And then I'd be putting the rest of the money on some potential future blue chips, like some mid-tier projects. Maybe you get into some lower projects, but really just have a primary focus on some of those bigger blue chips that are going to hold their value and move with the overall market if you believe in the overall market. But yeah, that pretty much sums up the strategy that I would do at different things, guys. And I do want to remind everyone here that sometimes the market's meta or the game plan or the strategy is going to change. So there are times when minting stuff doesn't make any sense. And then that's when, if you only have 1,000 ADA, you're really going to find yourself in a tough position because the market isn't really enabling you to make quick and rapid gains that you need to be able to get your bag up. But yeah, those are pretty much the strategies. I hope you learned something, guys. I hope I was able to help out a little bit. I also realize that some people are just not the people to swing trade. I realize that some people have more time than others. I know that some people are more of the holders. So this isn't necessarily going to work for everyone, but I do genuinely believe, in my opinion, this is what you should do. And this is what I have my cousin Justin doing, who's 15. His 400 ADA he started with about 2.5 months ago, is now around 26 to 2,700 ADA. So that's absolutely insane gains. And it was really just from me telling him, hey man, mint these projects. Here are some decent swing trades. Here are some decent plays. And, he got lucky on a couple of different mints. And sometimes that's all it takes to really scale this up and really level it up. But yeah, good luck, guys. Hope everyone makes a bag. See you guys soon.